Socialite and predator and accomplice to another socialite and predator, Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell has been found guilty of 5 of 6 charges of criminal sex trafficking of minors, charges that could ultimately land her up to 65 years in prison, so effectively the rest of her life. I just want to read some reactions from one of the most high-profile victims, Virginia Giuffre, who was not called to testify, but whose testimony has led to others coming forward and has really been the impetus behind this case against both Epstein, but also Ghislaine Maxwell. She says to The Cut, "I've been dreaming of this day for the last 10 years, not knowing that it was going to come. It's a bittersweet emotion because I have been fighting for so long, and it's definitely not over. There are many more people involved with this. It doesn't stop with Maxwell, but it's definitely a relief to know that she's off the streets. And no matter how rich or how connected you are, that you can still be held accountable." All right, well, there you have it. So no matter how rich or how powerful or how well connected you are. And so interestingly, some media outlets turn to different experts, some victims, to give their thoughts about the verdict on Ghislaine Maxwell. And many have turned to Alan Dershowitz, a notorious attorney, and also notorious because he was in fact named by Virginia Giuffre in her testimony. She has said that Epstein forced her to have sex with both Alan Dershowitz and Prince Andrew, an allegation that they both have denied. Another woman, Sarah Ransom, said that Epstein and Maxwell directed her to have sex with Dershowitz, which the famed attorney has also denied. If you remember, in a clip I do not want to play, Alan Dershowitz has said he doesn't know this woman, that he has a quote, perfect sex life. For some reason, he had to add that. You wonder what that entails. Probably not healthy. But let's take a look at Dershowitz's first response. This is from the BBC, right? Reputable news outlet turning to Alan Dershowitz, who had been named by a victim. This is what Dershowitz had to say.
The government was very careful who it used as witnesses. It did not use as a witness the woman who accused Prince Andrew, accused me, accused many other people, because the government didn't believe she was telling the truth. In fact, she, Virginia Giuffre, was mentioned in the trial as somebody who brought young people to Epstein for him to abuse. And so this case does nothing at all to strengthen in any way the case against Prince Andrew. Indeed, it weakens the case against Prince Andrew considerably, because the government was very selective in who it used. It used only witnesses who they believed were credible, and they deliberately didn't use the main witness, the woman who started the whole investigation, Virginia Giuffre, because ultimately they didn't believe she was telling the truth. They didn't believe that a jury would believe her, and they were right in doing so.
I'm sorry, what? Okay, guys, that was his response to hey, what do you make of this predator being found guilty for all of her horrible crimes? And then Alan Dershowitz is just like, well, it was great that they didn't call this one witness who's named me in her testimony because that witness is bad. Dude, way to make it about yourself. Cenk, weigh in here. What is going on?
Yeah, that was. Well, I was going to say a terrible oversight, and I think it is, and you'll see BBC's reaction to this story in a second. In American media, of course, that would not be an oversight. They do that all the time. So, and I don't mean in the case of child molestation, but I mean in many other cases, they'll have people that are involved in giant industries that'll push those giant industries, and they'll never say, oh, by the way, this person's a lobbyist or works for them, etc. So for us in America, we're a little bit more used to it, but it is a particularly outrageous case to do it in. And if you watch the whole appearance, he really does nothing but smear the woman who accused them and defend himself. So it barely has a fig leaf for any kind of excuse to have him on, or what his so-called expert analysis is. He doesn't even really talk about the heart of the case. He just talks about how, man, the government did a brilliant job of not using that person who has accused me over and over and over again. Yes. And look, so Dershowitz has been basically riding on his Harvard pedigree for his whole life. But now we've got folks who went to Stanford or were a professor at Stanford who then are now pushing COVID conspiracy theories, and they're going on podcasts, and people are saying, well, he's a professor at Stanford, it must be true, not noting that 99.9% of all other doctors and professors and scientists disagree. And to me, Dershowitz is pretty similar to that. He's represented some of the worst people on planet Earth. Not only is he accused in this particular case, but remember, he was also Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer, right? And this is really important, guys. When he represented Klaus von Bülow, OJ, Epstein, and by the way, all rich, all famous, he was not a publicly appointed lawyer. He chose to represent those people for money and fame. And so he's been riding on a credibility he hasn't deserved in decades, let alone what monstrous things he might or might not have done. And look, he's become absolutely Giuliani-esque later in his career, has now lost and shredded any ounce of credibility that he had, and he even talks like Trump. That's why he said he has a perfect sex life, like Trump had a perfect call. These guys have all become zombies. And by the way, this is another thing that people who have been accused and don't all go running to the right wing, because a lot of folks didn't do it, right? And I don't know the details of Dershowitz case, and I hope one day it does get adjudicated. But some folks, both after the fact and preemptively, if they think they're going to be credibly accused, go running into the welcoming arms of the right wing, because they know the right wing doesn't actually care about any sex crimes, child molestation. You could do anything, and as long as you call yourself right wing, they will accept you and defend you.
Yes, absolutely. And I do want to turn to a clip on Fox News, but first, the BBC did feel bad. They were like, oh, oopsies, has this not been going on for years and years? Has Dershowitz not been defaming Giuffre for like, years, right? Just defamation lawsuits back and forth between his alleged victim and himself. But no, okay, so I guess they had an oversight. So they issued this statement. They said, News Channel and BBC World, the interview with Alan Dershowitz after the Ghislaine Maxwell verdict did not meet the BBC's editorial standards, as Mr. Dershowitz was not a suitable person to interview as an impartial analyst, and we did not make the relevant background clear to our audience. We will look into how this happened. What? You didn't even push back. I mean, have him on, but ask him about it, right? He's obviously divulging a bunch of information about himself without you needing to. And as Cenk said, this is it happens all the time in American media. And in fact, Fox News also had Alan Dershowitz, again, who's been named by one of the victims of Epstein and Maxwell as someone who she was forced to have sex with. Here is how he's talking about her now on Fox. He's being asked, okay, what's your top line reactions? Again, he's making it about this woman and himself. Take a look.
One of the women testified. She was 14 or 15 years old. She was brought to Epstein for money by Virginia Giuffre, who was well over the age of consent. Virginia Giuffre then, according to the testimony at the trial, got naked, had sex with Jeffrey Epstein in order to facilitate her having sex with Epstein. So Giuffre, under the theory of the prosecution, is guilty as well. Yes, there are victims, but there are also perpetrators, and some of the people could be both victims and perpetrators. Giuffre could be a victim at one point, but then she became a perpetrator and a perjurer at another point.
Okay, I just have to say that, you do reading on this, you start to, if you're only coming into this story and you're hearing someone like Alan Dershowitz go on Fox News, go on the BBC and defame someone who was a victim. And I'm gonna play you a clip exactly in terms of how she was victimized. But you're starting to think, there are people out there who probably think, oh yeah, this woman should also be prosecuted because yes, she also brought people into the sphere. She trafficked too, so she should be prosecuted too. And I am so disgusted that someone as powerful and as influential as Alan Dershowitz is actually getting the upper hand on this story right now against someone who is a victim. And I do want to play, Cenk, before I turn to you. This is Virginia Giuffre in her own words to the Miami Herald. Remember, the Herald was very influential in breaking the Epstein story and breaking the Ghislaine Maxwell story. This is what she describes how that happened, how she was 16 and she was asked essentially and forced, right? And she was manipulated, talk about groomed, in order to get more and more young girls for both Ghislaine and Jeffrey Epstein. She explains how that works briefly here.
It kind of worked like a pyramid scheme. Ghislaine brought me in. I brought other girls in. Those girls brought other girls in. And no matter what, Jeffrey constantly had that open revolving door of young women, young teenagers, children, I like to call them, coming through his door for one purpose and one purpose alone.
There you go, a pyramid scheme of child sex trafficking. She was 16 when it started, she's now 38. And this is the person that Dershowitz is trying to basically smear and drag through the mud as this giant breakthrough has happened in her case.
Yeah, look, there's two layers of outrage here. One is having this guy who's accused in this case come on and smear one of the victims over and over again and imply that she's a perjurer and that she herself is the real culprit without giving the victim a chance to air her side of the story. Even if you're not sure what happened there, well, it doesn't seem quite fair, does it? That you only give a hearing to the person who's accused of being a child molester? And wait a minute, I thought the right wing was obsessed with, QAnon and the leaders and elites who are molesting children and have a child sex trafficking ring. Wait a minute, Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein had a child sex trafficking ring. Why is Fox News airing and sheltering Alan Dershowitz, who's accused as part of that ring? Maybe he isn't, I don't know. And by the way, I'm really, really looking forward to that being adjudicated. So if he's right, great, he'll have his day in his court. He claims he's one of the best lawyers in the country. Can't wait to see that in civil court, criminal court, wherever that might be. And maybe he's right, I don't know. But I'd really like to see the evidence. But Fox News doesn't care about the evidence. They're like, that's our expert. Our expert is the one accused of child molestation. And that's because we think he's awesome. And the second layer of the outrage is, not only are they not allowing the victim on, but they're pretending, especially the BBC in the way that they framed him. At least Fox introduced him as someone, I can't believe Fox did better than BBC, as someone who's has some interest in the case and is involved somehow. BBC introduced him as a neutral expert. No, that's ridiculous. He's gross. He's clearly one-sided, and on this side, in this case, the one side is his side. He's involved in it. And so this is not a close case. BBC with a massive error. Fox News is actually par for the course. I mean, if you're like Roy Moore or Donald Trump or Matt Gaetz or any of these right-wingers accused of sexual crimes against children, you go right into the welcoming, warm arms of Fox News, and they will have you as long as you hate the libs. What you do to children is totally irrelevant. And I mentioned Donald Trump in that context, so of course the right wing is going to catch feelings. Please don't just trust us, look it up for yourself. Donald Trump's exact quote, which I read yesterday, you saw on my Twitter handle, about how Jeffrey Epstein was a, quote, terrific guy, that they'd known each other and partied together for 15 years. And there's tons of pictures of them hanging out together. Also pictures of Donald Trump with Ghislaine Maxwell. And he said, well, Jeffrey likes them young. He knew, at a bare minimum, Trump always knew. And then after everything was exposed and Epstein went to jail and then committed suicide. And by the way, every right winger and every QAnon goes like, oh yeah, which Democrat killed him? You know, the president at the time was Donald J. Trump, who was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein. I don't know if they were best friends, excellent friends, but Trump admits they were great friends, right? And Trump knew. Look, I don't know what Clinton did. I don't know what Trump did. I don't know what Dershowitz did. But they all knew and were great friends with Epstein and Maxwell. That's a fact. And so the right wing doesn't seem to care at all. And when after Maxwell was arrested, even after Epstein's so-called suicide, Trump said that he wished her well. And if you thought that was now right-wingers are claiming that was a joke. Hilarious, you're the joke. We showed it to you 2 different occasions. A reporter asked him, really? She's one of the worst accused child molesters in American history. And he's like, yeah, I wish her well. Yeah, that's because they're really good friends. Stop looking at pizza shop basements and start looking, don't look down, look up, look up.
He was on the flight logs. Look up at the little private plane they were on together. It is disgusting. The last thing I wanted to say is it is such a bad look if the person who you've associated with, whose longtime partner you defended, Jeffrey Epstein, was just found guilty on 5 of 6 charges, largely based on this woman's testimony. Yes, she didn't testify, right? Maybe she didn't testify. The prosecution didn't see her as the best witness. They had plenty of witnesses, sadly, in this case to go on. So they had other women testify as to all of Ghislaine Maxwell's crimes. But then to be like, oh, all the rest of these people are telling the truth, and this one woman, yeah, she's lying. Excuse me, come again, how does that, aren't you the attorney? How does that hold up at all? Wouldn't you then be saying that the jury was completely wrong in this case? Then wouldn't you be on Ghislaine Maxwell's side? Just come out with it, say that you're on her side.
Yeah, look, I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna read the quote one more time because I just want people to understand the degree to which Donald Trump definitely knew that Epstein was with underage girls, okay? And don't get me wrong, they say, oh yeah, what about Bill Clinton? Yeah, absolutely. You know, Ghislaine Maxwell was at Chelsea Clinton's wedding. All of these elites were best friends and very likely they all knew. Now here's Trump admitting it. He said to New York Magazine at the time, I've known Jeff for 15 years, terrific guy. This is a direct quote. He's a lot of fun to be with. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do. And many of them are on the younger side. Many of them are on the younger side and he's a terrific guy. That's so much fun to be with. So right wingers, you should maybe ask your leader, what kind of fun did he have with Jeffrey Epstein? Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.